Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah.
Hey everyone, before we begin this week's episode of the Matthew and Rizzle Show, just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proof of Beauty. Proof of Beauty is an experimental digital experience studio. The blockchain is their canvas and the tokens are their brush. You can learn more about Proof of Beauty by checking out pob.studio. You can follow them on Twitter as well at PRRF Beauty. That's PRRF Beauty on Twitter and pob.studio on their homepage to learn more about their projects like Hash, London, and Publico. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Please refrain from damaging this.
There's the robot lady. Cool. Well, RoganX, man, welcome to the Matthew and Rizzle Show.
Thank you. It's amazing to finally have made it here. I think this month has been pretty epic for you guys. It's feels like a tough act to follow.
No, 100%. And like this has been a long time coming too. I mean, we've known one another for years at this point. I mean, all the way back to Cent days. RoganX, part of the Cent Mafia, Rizzle, myself, and a whole gang of others, artists and creator and builder. We have a lot to talk about today, but before we get into all of that, I'm just wondering if you can kind of introduce yourself to our listeners. Tell us about your past, kind of what brought you into the space, and then cover everything from like Cent days to present days.
Yeah, for sure. So I just want to get out of the way that I am not Joe Rogan. This is something that comes up frequently. People ask me, so like, are you Joe Rogan? No, I'm actually not. My name is Rogan. His name is Joe. So with that out of the way, I've been online since online was online, really, back in the 1990s, before the internet became the popular meetup place that it is today. There were bulletin boards where you tie up your phone line and kind of dial in. And that was, the beginning of the digital commons. So from there, I navigated my way through years and years of working in labor jobs and being a welder. And then in 2020, the pandemic struck and everything changed for everybody. I found myself a little bit listless and adrift. And so I managed somehow to find Cent, like a broken board floating in the ocean, and I clung to it for dear life. It actually came at just the right time for me. I was recently unemployed, and I thought, okay, well, now's the time to do something, reinvent yourself, anything. And when I came across Cent, I was blown away by the complexity of the people inhabiting it. And it struck me as a tight-knit community, but also welcoming. And so I just kind of came along and said, hey, here's me, here's what I do. And from that, I kind of not really sprang. I have kind of slowly crawled my way into being a bit of a known quantity. And I've been lucky enough to make some amazing relationships with not just yourselves, but like lots of crypto artists and amazing creators in the space. And yeah, it went from, I did like an Ethereum developer boot camp, and there was also, I think my actual first entry into kind of blockchains and the crypto art space was a poster contest for a crypto art platform that was, I'm not actually sure if it's still around in any form, but there was the poster contest. I came across that on Twitter. I ended up winning the poster contest. I got half an ether as the prize. and then kind of launched me to be able to get my ENS name and then just kind of get my start on the blockchain. And
you win like 2 poster contests, like back to back out of nowhere or something like that, like way back in the day. I feel like you won a poster contest for some event that we had with Metageist as well.
No, just the one.
Okay.
Unless I was just that out of it and I don't remember, but
dude, have you made, like, going back to what you were talking about, how like you sort of felt like the pandemic gave you this opportunity to like reinvent yourself, and like, you know, here we are sitting here and like you were saying in the beginning, man, like sort of a household name at this point for people who have been around long enough to know the people who have been around a long time. Have you made like the full conversion into like Web3 life? Are you still like dabble in the old world, or what's 2022 Rogan doing these days?
I put it this way. I haven't logged into LinkedIn, Facebook, or just about any other Web 2.0 site. Google would be the exception for that because we still kind of use that for work. But yeah, I would say that I'm fairly Web3 native at this point. There's not a lot going on that I don't kind of keep an awareness of. It's just kind of part of being in this space and you know, part of the job actually, which I'll get to in a moment, the whole kind of work for Figment thing. But
yeah, dude, I actually meant like in terms of your profession. Like I know you're saying you were, you know, bouncing around from different jobs before and trying to make like, you know, a leap. Are you like full-time Web3 now?
Yes. I work for the Web3 company Figment. It's essentially an infrastructure company. Like we're making a very long play on Web3 and the future of not just blockchains, but work. There's a lot that goes on in terms of staking, governance, supporting different proof of stake networks. And for myself, the way that I came to it was through Figment Learn. I was actually looking for information myself on how to build on various blockchains. And I kind of stumbled across their Discord one day, and based on some really amazing interactions that I had there, they offered me a position. And so since then I've been working with Figment to educate people, mostly developers and builders. But there's other components to it. And just the focus has been on educating people about Web3 and about how to be developers and how to like work with and interface with blockchains.
I love that kind of like reaching out to the team, chatting with them, and then like, yo, do you want to work here? Like,
right? It's so Web3, man. I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah, so, Figment is an amazing company.
Yeah. So what exactly is your role there? Are you like reaching out or like waiting for other devs to kind of contact you, like asking questions, or like, is there a specific service or suite that you're providing folks? Kind of unpack what you're doing at Figment.
So again, like Figment does quite a few things. In terms of startup culture, it's quite broad. We don't just focus on one area of blockchains and Web3. It's kind of like an all or nothing approach. So the Figment Learn offering, there's actually a website, learn.figment.io, where we host various tutorials for builders and developers to be able to kind of understand and get a leg up developing with various proof of stake blockchains. And that's been the main focus of my work for most of the last year. And then more recently, we've formed a DAO with other kind of Web3 powerhouses like Solana and Ceramic and Arweave and Pith, and to make like just to really kind of focus on the agenda of education, but without having an agenda about it. Like the way we see it is that the next phase of Web3, it's just we're all adding like digital this and that, but it's mainly about ownership. Like we want users and developers to have ownership of what they make, and we just kind of like align ourselves with the kind of people and processes that are going to empower everybody. And it's not a competition. Like we don't see ourselves as setting up to be, I'm not sure what what the right word for it is, but like we're problem solvers more than anything else. And there's like, I don't know, every day, just endless opportunity to talk to people about, hey, what is it that you would like to build? How can I help you? And that's been a lot of my focus, is just being a problem solver and kind of helping people to get past their issues to be able to build successfully. And so that's often quite gratifying, but it's all in the service of Web3.
Dude, it's really interesting. I mean, these are not small names that you're throwing around that are part of this DAO and like, you know, coming together with a common interest, which is honestly like pretty refreshing. But the scope is wide, man. Like, I'm curious to hear, like, who would you say is like the target audience or like the target user of, you know, this, you know, sort of onboarding educational product? And then like, I guess the second part of that is like, you know, how does one, given all these options and all these like communities sort of working together, like what's the strategy of like steering someone in the right direction? Like, you know, I guess as like a builder who like might be interested, I feel like I would almost be like overwhelmed with the possibilities. Like, you know, where does someone even start with this?
Yeah, that is a very good question. Where to start? Because there currently are quite a few offerings in terms of education for Web3. And we aren't, again, like we're not trying to compete. We're not trying to set ourselves up as, you know, the go-to place, other than like, we would like people to kind of come to us or come to Web3 through us. But it's mainly that we want to build a culture that emerges from interactions, and using the core principles and just the diversity of not just the members of the DAO itself, but like anyone who's online and curious about, hey, what is Web3? You know, what's actually going on here? Because I think if you look around, there's probably more definitions of Web3 than there are people in a way. But we want just to kind of make it clear that like a culture of witty optimism and humility is probably going to serve us better in the long term. But as far as how we actually intend to build this and how we want people to come through it, the target audience is pretty much anybody, but we do cater more to developers and builders. Kind of the reason for that is that I've heard this a lot myself, people saying that like, hey, the user experience for a lot of this crypto stuff leaves something to be desired. And they're not wrong. So it's kind of the onus is on the builders to make things much more accessible and to elevate the tools and the experiences to a point where everyone can use these things and kind of use them to seek freedom instead of kind of being hampered by the tools, if that makes sense.
So I guess the question that I have when it comes to the DAO that Figment is starting to kind of build and spin out, is that what we're calling the Builder DAO, or is the Builder DAO a separate DAO from that? Curious.
Yeah, well, so it's not really Figment's, you know, to own. Like we kicked it off because it's kind of a natural evolution of Figment Learn, is essentially what it comes down to. We saw that there were quite a few bottlenecks that were going to spring up as we tried to scale up what we were doing with Figment Learn. And so in order to decentralize this and to put the governance in the hands of the community and to allow it to grow organically instead of kind of at the behest of any one organization, we thought, well, hey, let's go and find the partners that we need in this space, who are, you know, the companies that are already doing amazing things and building amazing products and experiences for people. Then as long as we can work together with them, then it becomes much more decentralized and open and empowering, as opposed to being kind of, you know, Figment's brainchild. The way it's currently structured is that the governance for the foreseeable future is probably going to be handled by members of the various organizations. They're the core team for Builder DAO. And then as we kind of build adoption and people are actually using the products that we're making, then we will eventually be handing over governance pretty much entirely to the community. We have kind of a vision for how that should play out. But of course, no plan survives contact with the enemy, as the saying goes. But we're not doing this in a combative way. We definitely want people to come into the community, see what the options are, have a good feeling of like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can build, I can contribute. And then when you kind of provide the means for people to contribute in an open way, then what the product or the process that you get at the end of it is much more available. And so it just comes down to building in public for the most part. I know that sounds kind of like buzzwordy, but it's true.
No, yeah. And like, I think after NFTs, the next like major buzzword that has really been popping up, and it's natural because of the communities that have formed around the ownership of these digital assets are DAOs, right? These groups of folks coming together, these communities that are trying to build, right? Make money together or push forward a shared goal across the internet. Right now, it seems like most DAOs are Discords, maybe with like Gnosis safes, maybe a couple other tools. Like at this point, like what is the tooling landscape like as you and the other folks that are spinning up the Builder DAO are using, and like what's lacking? What don't you have that you think you need to have at some point in the near future when it comes to DAO operation, DAO growth, and the ultimate success of the Builder DAO and DAOs in general? What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree that the tooling is not as mature as we would necessarily like it to be at this stage of the explosive growth and proliferation of DAOs. There is quite a bit lacking if you look at very specific cases, but I think in general, it comes down to if the people who are participating in and building DAOs have a good idea of how they like to work, then you can pretty much make the tooling that exists work for you. But I think, at least in my personal opinion, like I certainly can't speak for anyone else here, I have enjoyed using the tooling that's available. When I say tooling that's available, like that's actually a very broad term, and it kind of depends on what exact task it is that you're kind of talking about. But in terms of Web3 native tooling, like anywhere that you interface with an actual blockchain, like for example, with Builder DAO, the first thing that we're building is like a decentralized learning platform. And so when we were speccing that out, we had to kind of go and look at, hey, what is the available tooling, and is it going to support our use case out of the box? And if not, how long is it going to take us to build what we need to serve that purpose? And so the answer was kind of, yeah, there are tools, but none of them really suit exactly what we need them to do without a bit of extra lifting. And so we tasked our engineering team, who are all really talented, brilliant people who have been doing amazing work. I just want to give them a shout out to the engineering team at Figment, that they've been able to do a lot of that lifting. And that is actually down to the fact that open source itself is as mature as it is. I feel that that's a really important kind of linchpin to the whole thing. If we were living in a world where open source hadn't have been developing for the last few decades, then none of this would be as easy as it is. That said, it's not exactly easy either. I think a lot of people probably don't have that great of an idea of or a conception of what goes into open source development, but that's changing over time as more people kind of come to the space with questions. And then we find ourselves in that unique position to help them and to answer those questions.
No, dude, I feel like I would echo that 100%. Like the amount of people that underestimate the importance of open source and the freedom of that information and the innovation that has allowed is, astounding at this point. And, definitely need more development in that area. And, awesome to see that you guys are working on it. You were mentioning before, man, how you're not trying to be combative and you're trying to maybe I'm not quite getting the right word, something along those lines. And you're trying to, be very inclusive with the community. Are there projects who are doing something similar that might see this as competition, or is there any other platform or people out there who are doing something similar that you guys have taken inspiration from? Interested to hear like what the landscape is of anyone who's doing anything like remotely like what you guys are trying to do.
Oh, there are quite a few. I personally take a fair bit of inspiration from what Nader Dabbitt's doing with Developer DAO. I'm not quite sure how he sees us, but I don't know. I don't want to really give a hot take here. I think the guy's amazing. I think what he's done with Developer DAO is monumental.
Give us a hot take.
Not just in this space, but it's sometimes it's a little bit hard to give people a full impression of who you are, what you're about, when you have never really had the chance to talk to them. And for my personal case, like I've never spoken to Nader one-on-one, but I've seen a lot of what he's done. And again, like I'm inspired by it, but it's not exactly the way that I want to go or that the team with Figment Learn wants to go. And so I think that there's a lot of cases where collaboration, but not necessarily cooperation, is important. And you can collaborate with someone without agreeing with their fundamental goals or how they do things or how they portray certain things. But it's actually it's a slightly interesting story because with Developer DAO, I own one of the NFTs, which like I'm a member of that DAO. And I've been so focused on what Figment's doing that I haven't really kind of been participating with Developer DAO a whole lot. But I do pay attention, but a lot of it is that my energy, by necessity of like Figment's my employer and that's my job, that's going to be where the majority of my energy goes. And so there's a lot of opportunity to learn from what other people are doing in this space, but it's not in a way that's like, oh, hey, I'm going to take your ideas, I'm going to steal those and I'm going to make them my own. It's more so that in the kind of the broader scheme of building on Web3 and enabling developers in Web3, that there's a lot of ground to cover there. And so if you kind of have, multiple teams working in tandem, you're going to accomplish more in the long run than if everyone just kind of focuses in one direction at the same time. Kind of like if a search party was out there looking for a lost child in the woods, you do a grid pattern, you spread out and you coordinate. Instead of, everyone just kind of like gangs up on one tiny little area at a time. So it's like by diffusing our attention slightly, then we can be more effective in this space. It's just kind of a weird necessity. But there's like Learn Web3 DAO, there's Developer DAO, there's Builder DAO. There's, the place is just packed with DAOs now. And that's not a bad thing, because like with a lot of other things in history that have taken on a life of their own, it's not just up to one group. It's not just up to one person or one company to kind of be the backbone. It's everyone working together but separately that forms the backbone of a lot of what's happening. And so like our mission at Builder DAO is to just help builders create the future of the web. That's as simple as I can put it. But that's actually like there's a lot more to that when you dive in.
How long does it take for me to learn how to build the future of the web? I say that jokingly, but like somewhat seriously, man. Is there like a path or like a program, or is it just sort of like a trove of information and you can just sort of dive as deep as you want to?
Well, yeah, and it really it depends on what your motives are when you're coming to the space. It also depends largely on kind of what your level of access and resources are. But traditionally, we've seen learning, like in non-Web3 terms, as something that people commit themselves to for a period of time, and then they learn something, and then they're supposed to be able to just go and apply that to whatever else they do. So like in the case of a traditional university style post-secondary type education, there comes a point where someone says to you, okay, you've mastered this subject, now go do things with it. And then ostensibly you are capable in that regard. The thing with Web3 is that it doesn't really work like that, because there's constant learning involved and things are always changing and shifting. And the space also moves so quickly that in order to truly keep up with it, like you constantly find yourself running and playing catch up. So the kind of path that we've taken is very targeted, very specific education on very narrow topics, which that does lead to this kind of fragmentation in a way where, okay, well, I could devote myself to learning about a particular blockchain, but then what happens if the community for that blockchain doesn't keep pace with the rest of the space, or if something changes and like no one uses that blockchain anymore, right? Like if you look at Tezos, there's been a huge uptake for artists for Tezos. Like everyone loved it. They were just like chicken nug. Hey, like, let's go. Let's mint everything on Tezos. And it's been amazing to see that. But interestingly, if you talk to people who are like crypto investors, they don't always have the same idea of or vision of a particular network. So like some people might go, Tezos, man, what's that? I don't really care. Like I would rather focus on Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything else. But when it comes to actual use cases, when people aren't sure, when they come into the space and they kind of look around and they go, wow, there's so many choices. Like, where do I go? Then it's useful to have not necessarily like a rigidly defined educational track for any given network, but what you want to do is give people enough choice and enough material that they can kind of pick it up and run with it themselves, and also with some guidance, right? But you don't want to be too heavy-handed with the guidance either, because then people will get a little bit, this is too stuffy, right? Like I've seen, Solana has probably one of the better developer communities and developer experiences of all the blockchains, but they're kind of like a new kid on the block in a lot of ways. But they've done well with it, because they've embraced that notion of like, hey, look, we're different from what is currently here. And so they play to those strengths.
To play devil's advocate a little bit and sort of piggybacking off of your and how I think a lot of people interact with like various DAOs, the sort of easy access to join, but then the hard part is sort of like going deep. And just like the limited time that most people have, like if you, like yourself, working for a project, you really do have limited time to kind of like focus on any given DAO, any given time. Do you think that there are just too many DAOs and DAOs aren't sticky enough yet to kind of hold people's attention? And like, what does that mean in a world where like everyone's spinning up a DAO and no one's really participating? Like how are we able to really incentivize deeper, richer participation in any given DAO?
Oh, that is a really good question. Geez, I don't know if I'm necessarily the guy to ask. My feeling on it is that I have been involved in a few DAOs that for me haven't really stuck. And a lot of that I feel is down to communication. It's not so much that I don't agree with the DAO itself, or I, fall out of love with the mission or what the DAO is intended to accomplish. But coordinating people when the world is so loud and busy is actually a lot more difficult than we give it credit for. And I like that concept as you bring it up of like, are DAOs sticky enough? Like, is this going to hold people's attention? Is it going to, give them a reason to keep participating? And I think a lot of that comes down to economic incentive. currently, but at some point, we kind of have to ask ourselves, like, is this aligned with, my personal goals? Is this aligned with my mission? Or am I going to have to go through a process of kind of reinventing those goals to better fit with the DAO landscape? And I think it's an ongoing question that we don't really have an answer for yet. But it strikes me that when like there are so many DAOs, I can't name them all, where someone might become overwhelmed and go, well, where would my efforts best fit into this landscape? This is where the communication part really becomes so necessary, where a DAO really should be able to sum up its mission very succinctly and to give people an impression that, like, yes, this is important work and we want your contribution. And so then if you're going to participate, then it's not just like a diffusion of responsibility. It's, there are important tasks that people need to accomplish. But like, for example, with we'll just take crypto skulls, because this was recently DAOified. I own a couple of crypto skulls, and so that gives me the right to vote on proposals that have been put to the crypto skulls community. And, I can totally sit on my hands for the most part and just be like, no, I'd prefer to just fold the crypto skulls and kind of see where that goes. But it's having the opportunity to be able to participate in governance. I think as time goes on, more and more people are going to take those opportunities and run with them. And so that's where the need for tooling becomes so vital, is because you want people to be able to make strong contributions from the time they join. Like, you don't want to say, okay, well, you're a member of the DAO, but it's going to take you months to even understand our mission. Like, that doesn't really work for people, does it? Hopefully that answers your question. Like, I know I can kind of drift off there, but
no, 100% it does.
Rogan, it just question again, piggybacking off of something you were saying earlier about like how fast the landscape changes, and completely understand the approach of Figment. You don't want to like lock people into a certain path, especially with how quickly things change. From your end of things, as someone who's trying to provide these tools and services to people, like, how do y'all manage to stay on top of the changing landscape and add those options, as you encounter them or whatever, to give to the users of the platform? And after a certain point, do you think you will collectively have to be forced to sort of like choose a lane rather than being able to offer like an all-encompassing toolkit just because the landscape grows so wide? Yeah, man, just interested to hear like the business end of that thing.
Well, in my time with Figment, we have gone, I would say, just entirely and fallen in love with, it's not just the idea of proof of stake, it's how proof of stake can actually benefit people and organizations. I say proof of stake, it's kind of shorthanding a whole lot of concepts into this one idea of like, I guess to put it in a bit more kind of colloquial terms, like putting your money where your mouth is, right? So Figment is backing infrastructure and supporting pretty much every aspect of proof of stake networks. And so there are some proof of stake networks that Figment doesn't necessarily participate in governance with or support. But as new networks come along, we are aware of them and we want to support them to achieve their goals. But to kind of get back to addressing your actual question, it is very difficult to keep up with. Personally, I've had to learn an incredible amount of information in a very short period of time about pretty much every proof of stake network out there. Because at some point, someone is going to come along with a question, what about this? And I don't want to necessarily be the person with all the answers. I think there are definitely individuals and groups out there that have more information than I do. So I go and try and learn from them so that I can at least know enough to say, look, I don't know enough. and then point people in the right direction. But that does imply kind of an ownership of my own learning to a degree that before I came to Web3 was not part of my life. So it was a huge change. But in an encouraging sense, as builders, everyone is kind of on a journey of mastery, whether you're a carpenter, a welder, a software developer. And we want to be optimistic about the fact that what we're building is going to have longevity, right? So in this sense of not just Figment and BuilderDAO, but like everybody in the Web3 landscape, we're not really trying to replace the current web. We just want to address certain key issues and kind of make sure that everyone is seeking freedom instead of, kind of going, well, hey, how do we silo this? How do we keep control over this? And so, like, for me, I have an idea of what I would like the future to look like. And other people have their own ideas of that. And so we have to coordinate. And so DAOs are a useful tool for that, in terms of like blockchain networks and the technology behind it. I think a lot of people seek to benefit from this. But like we have, and like by we, I mean like the collective we, our species. We have this propensity to, I don't know, like we want to do things, we want to build. And so this idea in blockchains of like permissionlessness, if someone gives me the tooling to do something, I might do the job in a different way than they intend. And that's not always a bad thing, because in the process of doing that, I might innovate and then things get better for everybody as a result. So we're trying to, I would say, maximize freedom in the way that people build, give them good choices, and provide like strong incentives to build in a collective and positive way. Like, hopefully that gets at what you were asking.
And then, like, in terms of like next, like what's next up, what people can get excited about, what like is currently a work in progress. What do y'all have cooking on that front?
Well, I could drop all kinds of alpha, but I have to kind of keep myself restrained because we haven't had the chance to do a proper launch yet. But I can say
drop all the alpha. Drop it all.
I'm being political because I don't want to get in trouble with my project manager. But we are building a decentralized education platform or learning platform that's basically going to provide people with much easier access to the learning material, but also provide content creators and writers easier access to the audience, and provide, strong crypto economic incentives all around so that people's missions are kind of aligned where, for example, there could be a new blockchain network that comes along and they say like, look, we haven't really been able to afford to hire people to write our documentation, but here's what we can offer you. And then people can take that and go, yeah, I'll work for that. I'll work with that. And then they can do the learning. They can provide the material to the community, and then they can be rewarded for that through people tipping their content and also helping to curate their content and make a strong case for that content within the community. Like, for example, there's a lot of sites that provide like tutorials, and where we're trying to go is that, because like developers can get lost in what's kind of known as tutorial hell, where you kind of get to this point where, you're following tutorials, but you can't synthesize that into your own original project. And we want people to be able to break out of that. So what we try and do with our material is provide like very concrete examples of things that people can build. And then over time, you do that enough, you're going to build enough of a mastery that you can then take that to your own project. So that's kind of like the direction that we'd like to take it. But of course, there's always, space for the community to take it in the direction that the community wants to take it too. Like we're not trying to be prescriptive here. We want to just empower people to build what they envision. So the tooling for that We will be launching soon, TM. But I think there's just a strong case to be made for, we don't want to put the cart before the horse, so to speak. So we're being a little bit cautious in terms of our launch window so that we don't end up being all hype with no substance, I guess. But I think from what I've seen, a lot of the Web3 space is building towards like everybody wants to be able to make cool stuff that everyone enjoys, right? So sometimes in order to do that, you can use tools that are freely available, and that's great. Like as an artist, like I've used free open source software to make a lot of my art. I've also used Photoshop too, but sometimes there's more friction with paid tools or things that you have to put more effort into using. And so there's like if someone were to come to me right now and say, hey, what's the best way for me to learn how to build in Web3? I could lay out a whole raft of links and resources for that person and say, here, go here, check this out and read this documentation and then do this. They might not necessarily be successful. And so a lot of it is that we also want the community to be able to help whoever is coming along. Because as we like to say, one of the best ways for people to learn is to learn from someone who was where you are, but is now kind of one step further ahead. So they can explain what they know to you, and they still understand and have empathy for where you're coming from, being someone who's so new to it. But I'll kind of stop myself there because that's like a really easy topic to get lost in.
It makes sense to me, man. Rogan, if you've listened to our episodes, we love to do sort of like an intrusive shakedown of people's wallets. And we all know you've been around for like a very long time, enough to, even if you probably weren't even trying very hard, accumulate a ton of stuff that might be interesting for our audience to hear about. You mentioned the crypto skulls. I know you got a few of those. Are there stuff totally unrelated to what you're currently working on that you like really love to collect or have accumulated, or like meaningful NFTs that you're hanging on to?
Pretty much everything on my wallet is meaningful. So that's actually a really good. That's a really good question. Let's see. I have an NFT from Cryptonatrix that I'm particularly fond of, the monolith. There's a little bit of history there. I bought it for myself as a birthday present. There's what else? Pretty much anything I have from Bruce the Goose. There's a lot of love there. I miss that guy. I don't get to talk to him nearly as much these days because work just keeps me so busy. But I do try. Really amazing person and a big part of my personal journey in the crypto space. What else? WG Meets. I have Ziggy's Move, which is a really cool animated piece. I've got, let's see, a couple of anonymous nobody pieces that I'm fond of as well. It's a huge list actually. Not as huge as some collections, but I feel like it's a collection for me that I never intended to have necessarily. Like when I came to this space, I didn't think to myself, oh yeah, I'm going to be a collector. But what I have in terms of NFTs and the artwork that I have is all quite meaningful to me. I don't tend to buy things that I don't like, and I certainly don't buy things for their speculative value. But that's just that's a me thing. Another piece that I'm actually really, really fond of, and there's a bit of a sad story behind it, a happy but also a sad story behind it, is a piece that was gifted to me by a wonderful Iranian woman by the name of Sherry Cheyenne. She, unfortunately, because she's Iranian, just had all of her pieces delisted from OpenSea. I laugh, but there's nothing funny about it. I'm actually pretty hot under the collar about that. So this kind of story there is that she gifted me this piece, and I was like showing it to all my friends and like, hey, this is amazing. I really like it. and then it no longer shows up on OpenSea. Like, I still have the NFT. I can still, I have the image. I can show people the art. That's not the issue. It's just the fact that there's not really a place to easily share that artwork from. And that's kind of another problem in the space with like vis-a-vis decentralization and a whole bunch of other kind of unrelated issues. But there's what else? Oh yeah, there's the Poe app. That's actually the collaboration between Rizzle, Bruce the Goose, and RoganX. Yeah, that we did. That's really going back. I have a few NF tweets back from when Cent was doing tokenized tweets.
Back to last year, kicking off.
Yeah. Ancient history.
Feels like forever ago.
What else? It does. And so like I've had a lot of time to think about this notion of, the weird kind of time distortion that happens in the crypto space. And I think what the main reason for it is because it absorbs your attention so completely that you kind of lose sight of the outside world. And so your frame of reference shifts to a level that, suddenly you're like, whoa, what day of the week is it? Really? It's Thursday already? Holy moly. Like the week really flew by, right? Like it's almost the weekend already. And so this happens over and over and over again. And then you get this overwhelming sense of, time moves so quickly. Like time doesn't move any more or less rapidly just because you're paying attention to crypto, but it is so enthralling that you kind of don't want to look anywhere else. And then it just absorbs all your attention. And because there are so many projects going on, it's hard to filter it out and kind of get that sense of like time and place. So yeah, for me, it's been a couple of short years that I've been involved in crypto and web3 and the kind of crypto art space, but it feels like a lifetime, and it is a lifetime. It's just a very short one. And hopefully it will continue for much longer. Like I have no intention of going away. I will be here until you kind of drag me kicking and screaming. But there's, I think in terms of people collecting NFTs, in terms of crypto art, in terms of what people enjoy, it is so personal and subjective. And so someone might look at my collection and go, well, yeah, like nice NFTs, bro. and not really kind of get the history behind them. It's sad for me. Like I still have some NFTs that were donated because I did a community fundraiser for Bruce the Goose. He was hacked and had like 12 Ether just ripped away from him by some malware back in 2020. And, right before Christmas, having, pretty much all of your assets just taken away from you is no, like I was not going to let that stand. And there were a lot of people in the community, Eric, Second Realm, WG Meets, there's a whole list of names, people that donated art. And then we did a charity fundraiser through the Art Gallery Auction House with Danopan. Amazing person, pillar of the community. And we managed to raise like 5.5 Ether for Bruce the Goose. And like, this isn't kind of a story that I tell around the dinner table because people who aren't involved in the space have no real frame of reference other than like, oh, you did a charity fundraiser. Like, that's cute. But it was important. And at the time I felt so strongly about it. And then early 2021, I suddenly find myself working at Figment and my whole life changed. And someone at some point said to me, well, it's good karma. Like you had it coming because you did something so important for somebody else. And it's hard to believe that on a lot of levels, but I think it actually is true. I don't think that I would have had the opportunities that I had if I hadn't have invested myself so completely, like body and soul, in the space and in that idea of, not just decentralization, but like, look, we are all connected and we have to help each other. So there's a lot of art history in my wallet.
I love that. I love all the stories that pop out of that wallet, just looking and thinking about what you've collected. And there really is a lot to that kind of like give good to the space and get a lot of good back from the space, 100%. And before we do drop off, just let folks know where they can follow you, where they can follow Figment, and any other channels that they need to be aware of before we wrap up.
Oh, yes. The roll credits. Okay. So like, Figment, figment.io is the website. If you want more information about the company, learn.figment.io is where you can go if you're a developer looking for tutorials and information about various blockchains. There's lots of really good tutorials there for like Near, Solana, some for Tezos. We actually have like a dApp that we built to help people learn about these various blockchain networks in a very hands-on way. Learn web3 dApp is what it's called. That's on GitHub. There's, for me personally, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm RoganX4, because RoganX was taken for some reason. And I was on Instagram until I joined Twitter, but I haven't touched Instagram since, and I don't think I ever will again. So like, I wouldn't worry about that. I'm on Discord mainly for work. I, at one point, was one of those people that hit the 100 Discord limit. And I was like, oh, this is so much. But then in 2021, I was like, no, look, I have to really focus. So I kind of tore it all down and just started from fresh. But, I'm on the Figment Discord and the BuilderDAO Discord. There's links to both of those on my Twitter as well. I don't really do pinned tweets. I think what's currently on my pinned tweet is like the last piece that I minted. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm a total Twitter head. It was funny because prior to 2020, like you wouldn't have caught me dead on Twitter, but now it's just such a weird, like, this is where the conversation is. So
no, 100%. Crypto Twitter really sucked me in. I was a lurker for the longest time. And when you get into this space, I mean, after Cent kind of went away, like Twitter really replaced it and became that forum for communicating and sharing with everyone in this space. But Rogan, dude, it was such a pleasure to be able to chat with you again. It's been a minute. It's been cool to check in on everything that you've been doing in the interim, and just really excited to keep watching you build and create heading forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, it is very exciting. I look forward to the future every single day. And I hope other people do as well. I hope the enthusiasm is contagious.
Of course, man.
Cool. Where's the robot lady?
Is there something that I can assist you with?
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this week's episode. Just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proof of Beauty. Proof of Beauty is an experimental digital experience studio. The blockchain is their canvas and the tokens are their brush. You can learn more about Proof of Beauty by checking out pob.studio. You can follow them on Twitter as well at PRRF Beauty. That's PRRF Beauty on Twitter, and pob.studio on their homepage to learn more about their projects like Hash, London, and Publico. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.